Welcome to the Here's Waldo podcast, where we sit down with top visionaries and creatives in the video game industry. Together, we'll unravel their journeys and learn more about the path they're forging ahead. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hi, I'm Lizzie Mintis, founder and CEO of Here's Waldo Recruiting, a boutique video game recruitment firm. This is the Here's Waldo podcast. In every episode, we dive deep into conversations with creatives, founders, and executives about what it takes to be successful. You can expect to hear valuable lessons from their journey and get a glimpse into the future of the industry. This episode is brought to you by Here's Waldo Recruiting, a boutique recruitment firm for the game industry. We value quality over quantity, transparency, communication, and diversity. We partner with companies, creatives, and programmers to understand the why behind their needs. We provide a white glove experience that ensures a win-win outcome. Before introducing today's guest, I want to give a big thank you to Chad Taylor for introducing us. Chad was a reference of someone I hired a long time ago and is now my personal friend. So thank you, Chad. Today we have Jerry Hook with us. Jerry has been in the video game industry for over 20 years. He was a founding member of Xbox Live and worked in various roles, bringing Halo and Destiny to life. And now he's at Jar of Sparks. Thanks for being here, Jerry. Before we dive in, can you tell everybody a bit about what Jar of Sparks is?
Yeah, so I'm Jerry Hook, CEO of Jar of Sparks. We recently founded the studio with a group of friends of mine, Paul Crocker, Greg Stone, Steve Dick. And we're a brand new studio. We really want to get back to what makes games fun as a narrative-driven action game is really what we want to go after. And so it's a little bit different from my roots, from what I've done over the last 20 some odd years, but it's where I think all of our passions are as a team. And so that's what we want to go after.
Congrats. What is the story behind the name, picking a business name?
Yeah, so it's so funny. So it's so we had for those of you who have never been through trademark law globally, trying to get a name that passes North American, European, Asian trademarks, very difficult. And so you quickly realize that it's almost like gamer tags back in the day, right? One name gamer tags. Used to not be rare. Now they're super rare. Then it was 2 names, and now it's 3 names. And so basically, the gist of it was, I wanted to have a name that really represented capturing innovation and capturing passion. And there's a lot of stuff that you go through when you're researching. Basically a lot of quotes that we really love, and one of the main ones is. The best way to predict the future is to invent it. And that really captures lightning in a bottle. And when you take a look at a team, right, the teams, the sparks, and the studio is really the jar that contains all of their ideas and all of their energy that they are trying to bring to passion and bring to bear. So the name Jar of Sparks, or as some of my partner teams say, it's like, isn't that just a light bulb? Yeah, that works too, right? It's an idea. It's about innovation. It's about coming up with that cool idea that you look at and you go, oh, that would be amazing. And because we wanted to bring together people and have their passion, really strive for excellence, and not do the same thing over and over again. We really wanted to invent, right? And so I think the name Jar of Sparks really captures that essence of innovation.
Yeah. Trademark law is such a treat.
It was, wow. It was, I started off with like 250 names. As soon as you go through your first pass of 250 names, it was down to like 7.
I was lucky. My friend helped me with mine. She's much more creative than I am. So, and it's trademarked. It's done for now. So yeah, good time.
Awesome.
Tell me about founding the studio. Where were you? How did the idea come about? Like, how did you decide to go with a NetEase partnership opposed to?
Yeah, sure. So, it was I think I think there's always a point in your career, and this is at any age, truthfully, where you're just like, you know what? I just I need to ultimately challenge myself by jumping off a cliff and seeing if I can build something on the way down. Right.
Yeah.
And so we were getting ready to launch Halo Infinite, and it was a familiar cycle that I'd been through in the game industry so many times, where it's very painful. It's really really hard. Decisions, frankly, that were made way before you for sure that you're on a team, right? And things you can't control because they were made that far ago,
Yeah.
or that long ago, right? And I just started looking around, just saying, "Hey, look, what do I really want to do?" And I started, I think, like what everybody else does, is you just start looking around, start seeing what's out there. And one of the main things that um, I learned pretty early on in my career, um, basically before I joined Xbox, was I think the worst thing you can do for yourself is you undervalue how valuable you are in the marketplace.
Yeah.
And when you undervalue yourself, it really prevents you from going after stuff that you would even think is crazy. And so much of what life is right, the connective tissue between, luck, your own passion, and your confidence to go after it. And so many of us hamper ourselves by holding ourselves back. Um, and the other big thing is that I'm a person who does not care about the word no. And that is a
I got
skill
it.
that is a skill that you definitely have to learn,
Yeah.
especially if you're going to go after something that scares you, right? And so for me, I started the journey the same way that I frankly started the journey I did for Xbox, which was what if, right? Let me go check, see what went out there. So I started going to the same thing, right? Went to the same, like, what's my next executive job? What would that look like? And
Yeah.
realized I was like, yeah, but then what's that going to look like 5 to 10 years? I literally will be in the same cycle again, right? So then I was like, this is what two how many years have I been in Jar Sparks now? So it's been a year and a half. So it's been, I don't know, it was about 3 years I think ago, where I just started looking at investment, started looking to see what would it take to get Series A funding, what would it take to, and I hadn't done this before, right? So this is all new. So I had nothing to lose, nothing to gain. And just started reaching out, just saying, "Hey, look, here's my background. This is what I'm interested in doing." Um, at the time, I was really just searching, and got a ton of offers that frankly scared me because I was like, no, I don't think I'm good enough, right? And I think a lot of people do that. Um, and but then just started learning. Then started out. Then it forced me to ask myself harder questions of like, really, what was I looking for? What was I going to go do? Was I going to go build something complete from the ground up by myself and go do that? And then was I going to go do it alone? And the cool thing is I think again, a lot of us in the game industry, we talk about like doing our own things. It's like a common conversation that we have around, tables and whatnot. And I just talked to a bunch of friends who I'd done in the past, and they were interested as well, but they had more fear, they had more trepidation. And so then I wanted to start looking at, okay, are there other things I could do besides, pure investment, which holds the most risk? Our market today is very similar to the way it was in the 90s back then. So I knew that all of this free money was just going to evaporate pretty quickly, like we're seeing right now, because that's what market corrections do, right? And so what I wanted to be able to do was, okay, well, I do believe that I'd be better off with a team around me than starting completely from scratch. And I always feel that there are a lot more smarter people than I am, and I like to have them around me to challenge me. And so try to do that, right? So then it became trying to find partners and trying to find, can I find a joint venture who could support me on some pieces of building your own company, or do I do a full partnership? And we ended up with a partner of NetEase, and NetEase was fantastic, primarily because they really didn't push on the business side, they pushed more on the creative side, which was unique. And Simon has, I love people who are audacious. Like they're really, really ambitious to go after stuff that like you just look at and you're going, that's scary. Like trying to do that is scary, right? And Simon definitely embodied that. And he had with him in particular some amazing talent that I really, really made me respect what they were trying to do. And so we just had a talk. We had to talk about investment, if they just wanted to invest in us, or he offered me to go, first party, and what would that do for us, right? And they didn't really push on one or the other heavily. They were just really looking for like, what are you looking for? Like, what do you really want to do? How do you want to do it? And it's one of those things where you meet a large corporation and you're either like, oh, I'm swimming in the water with sharks, or you feel like there's actual partnership, especially from an approach on how you want to do things, how do you want to build things, right? And so that made me step back again and start asking the harder questions of like, okay, great, so let's say I get a deal for a studio. What's important to me, right? And it's important to me that one, the publisher recognizes how hard the game business is, and trying to be profitable right out of the gate is very, very difficult. And I wanted to make sure that I could do things like protect the team from that, and try to do the best I could to help make sure that as we built things, we planned for failure. We didn't just plan for heroic success, right? And I was very conservative because to me, being conservative and not shooting your saying I'm just going to go climb Mount Everest day one and not planning for no, it takes hills, right? Like everyone will go, yeah, I'll just do as good as Riot did, or I'll do as good. And it's like, you have to remember there is a journey. It wasn't day one, right? And so I just tried to plan very, very cautiously to help make sure worst case scenarios, the team's still taken care of. And to build that very methodically. And NetEase was on board. So that's how it happened.
The rest is history.
Yeah.
Tell me what you've thought about. You said the team is one of the most important aspects of the company. They're sparks in the jar. How have you thought about team building in the early days?
Yeah, so our first thing really was, and again, I think this happens with any type of team building where everybody brings their PTSD, and some people, they like to hold their PTSD and pet it and keep it around them and like use it as a security blanket. And then there are those who just want to like throw it and just like, let's just make sure we never ever do that, right? And so it was really, the early days were a lot of fun. After I spent I think it was about 3 months alone, going through trademark stuff and a bunch of other legal things, getting the company, founded. And then finally had the team around me, and we spent a lot of time just playing games, learning what we liked. Like, what do we like to play? What do we like to spend time with? I had done a bunch. Part of that 3 months was just taking a look at market strategy and market thoughts of where the industry was going to be in 5 years. And then we also were just, basically creating a list of our PTSD of things we did not want to have repeated. Like, how do we prevent ourselves from doing this? And we failed at some of that, because some of the PTSD is caused by us, and just the way we function. And so some of it is like, well, how do we prevent that? Like, how do we keep that top of mind to always improve, right? And so one of our core values is expand when proven. And I think it's probably the most used one because you use it in everything. You use it in your business. You're like, look, don't get over your skis. Like, I don't care if you're an optimist. I don't care if you believe, you used to be, let's just I'll do sports because that's easy. If you win the Super Bowl, doesn't mean you're going to win every single year.
Yeah.
It means you have the experience to have done it once. But next year, you're probably going to have a different team. You've probably replaced team members with other people. And that's when I look at a team or building a team or a studio, I really view it as a sports team. I know some people think of family and stuff like that. And I'm just like, no way. Like, I would never have my family work for me and work 30 hours, if necessary, a day right next to them. They would kill me. It would be fighting each other all the time. No, but if you're a sports team, You're trying to hire the best people who know their roles, who can focus on what they have to do under a role to be to hit that level of excellence to build and be successful, right? And so, that's what we started. We said, what are those cultural values? How do we prove ourselves? And I'm somebody who really believes that you have to have lanes for everybody. Like all of us, especially in small companies, right? We have to usually do a lot of things. Like I load the water in the fridge, I pick up the packages. It doesn't matter that I'm the CEO. That's irrelevant, right? You're a small business. Everybody does everything, right? But you have to have lanes, otherwise you don't allow the people who are coming on board, you're stepping on their toes all the time. And so for me, it's we at least have a culture that says, hey, look, we want to be ambitious, we want to go invent, we want to make sure that we're proving ourselves before we commit to it, and don't overcommit, or don't rely on hopes and dreams and rainbows to make something happen, that you're not lying to yourself for what the capability of the team is. And so a lot of that went into those early days of outlining what's the culture we're going to build, that sort of thing.
I like the sports team analogy much better than the family. The family actually creeps me out, and you have to love people even when they mess up, or even when they don't give it their all. Not to say you can't love your employees when they mess up or don't give it their all, but on a sports team, here's what you need to do, and we need to talk about how you're going to do it. And
correct. It's also
out, right?
Yeah. The other thing about a sports team is you're usually trying to compete.
Yeah.
And business games, you are competing, like whether you want to or not, you are, right? So let's say we're trying to go AA, AAA. We want to make a high quality game that we believe is going to have market impact, right? That means you're competing, like no matter what you're doing, right? And so when you build a team, it's not about the team always being happy, because doing something that is great doesn't always create happiness. It creates pain, because all of us, myself included, are having to learn new skills to go after something better than what we've done in the past, right? And but what you want to know is like, no, we're all on the journey together. We're in the fight together, right? You're not just because you sprained an ankle doesn't mean that you're off the team. It means, no, you're still on the team. You may have to shift what you have to do, but you're on the team because we're all in here in the fight to go make it happen, right? And that's the biggest thing that people should know, is that no, they're here to go after something that is going to have an impact in their lives and their families' lives, and hopefully in the marketplace as well. Like that's the hope, right? That's what we're trying to go for.
Totally. And I think people even tell me like, oh, you're a business owner, you must take vacation all the time, you have so much flexibility. And I'm like, I work all the time. So
no, here's the funny thing. It was interesting. I thought, like, here's something I think is common that everybody does, right? When you work for someone else, you're always trying to impress those individuals, make sure that you're viewed as you're doing good, you're reliant, hopefully you're one of the players that they really rely on to go be successful, right? When you're the CEO, your entire company is that. I put more stress on myself helping make sure that I am meeting everybody's needs than I ever would have. The other interesting thing is hours are almost invisible to you. Like I have to put alarms up on when to stop working, because otherwise I will just work, right? Like I don't have kids anymore, so my time, like usually parents have windows where like, oh no, if we don't have dinner at 5, the kid's going to be cranky, they're going to be yelling. Like
that doesn't schedule. Yeah,
that doesn't exist. There's a schedule there. Like totally. When you don't have that anymore, you're like, oh, I could just work until I fall asleep. Okay. Or until Gretchen throws something at me, right? But so it is a very big difference when you're a CEO, because everything's on you. And so it is not restful at all. It is the opposite.
It's a lot of mental load for sure. And I think when you're an employee too, you like, oh, I worked, I put in my hours, and you have this thing you need to get done, but if it's not done, maybe someone else can help you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I actually find that is an interesting thing about the game industry. Is one of the things that why I wanted to stay in the industry instead of go back to tech was just the passion.
Yeah.
Like, there's just so many instances where you have incredible people whose talent just as a player as well as somebody who creates games just puts you in awe, right? And you're you're trying to help them balance their load so that they don't let their passion like take over everything, right? um but you also have the challenge from a studio perspective is how do I have that person not worry about anything else except for how they can create and how they can create well, right? And how they can continue to do that without any other concerns, right? Um, and yeah, and that's hard because usually you don't see a lot of the clock watching or the I've worked so many hours type of mentality in the game industry, and it can be problematic. You got to watch out for it, but it's definitely something that helps, right? Because if you can get out of their way and let them go do amazing things, they will.
There's a ton of passion. And it's
Yeah,
also so much collaboration, which I think is unique, and
absolutely.
collaboration between people with very different brains. Like
Yep.
artists and engineers, it's almost like living in Texas. You just have totally different categories, but they all work in harmony somehow.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there's one of the things I observed that I've always found frustrating is uh, the industry doesn't give creators and artists enough credit
Yeah.
for what it actually takes, right? Like you'll have the MBAs and the publishers and all the business side go, well, just copy these guys and you'll get the same results. And it's like, really? Because you've not been able to do that, like ever. Like that's not how this works, right? Um, and that's why it's such a unique talent, because it's one part schooling and three parts talent. Like you're not going to quantify it, right? It's like you're trying to write down the taste of a strawberry. It's people's skill set in the industry, both from an art side and from the creative side, is mind blowing, and you have to respect that. Like that's Paul Crocker's our creative director, and the biggest thing that I wanted him to be very very comfortable with was he owns the creative. Like it's as much as it's the studio's game, obviously, right? But I want him to always know that I'm never getting in his way. Like he is better at this than I am. And so for me to get him in his way
Yeah.
is truthfully disrespectful. And it's disrespectful to him. Um, and it's probably the number one thing that we spent so much time on. It's also something that I see that studios struggle with is when they have power dynamics in the executive area where you're not really clear of who makes decisions. And my whole team knows that the creative decisions are made by Paul, not me. If I have opinions that are different than Paul's, I usually just talk to Paul. I'm just like, I hate this. And then we have a conversation about it, right? Um, and that's it's the same thing with, art directors like Martin Deschambault. He was an art director and he's worked on the art from Assassin's Creed and all these other things. Like, what value am I adding to him looking over his shoulder going, do that green, right?
Yeah.
It's like, what? It's like, good, Jerry, he should pat me on the head and send me on my way, right? And you got Dan Chosich. Dan is an incredible talent. Like he's done everything from movies and films, TV, video games. Like it's just unbelievable, incredible, right? And like, what am I going to tell him that's going to improve anything, right? And so all these things is just trying to, I think if studios worked more in a high respect fashion for the roles and the expectations of their people, it would allow the leadership to get out of the way more, and allow the team to produce more.
Hire smart people, get out of the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to talk about your career path and your days at
Mhm.
Microsoft. Tell me about you were in tech and then you switched to games and you were a high performer at
Yeah.
Microsoft. Microsoft high performer, which is clearly this Microsoft term. Tell me about all that.
Yeah, where to put ego. There's so many things from hiring that is so fascinating. I started off in tech in the startup scene in the 90s. So for those listening, I'm ancient. So I started my career before there was a thing called the internet. And I started off actually on the tech side, helping build a lot of internet infrastructure, internet tech. Um, and I did automatic publishing and did first clients that use basically web style interfaces as a front end for native clients. And uh, when I joined Xbox, it was I'd been a startup previously that I helped get Microsoft to purchase. And after that purchase, Microsoft would put groups at that time in this group called Emerging Technologies. And I found out that I had been working on a lot of automated publishing stuff. And the first project I actually worked on at Microsoft was called ClearType, which nobody knows about or cares about, but it's basically the font technology that Apple basically used and Microsoft created its own version. And they called it ClearType. Boring, and no one cares about it because they just want it to work. But anyways, it's technology and it was a lot of fun. And I went to an interview for this group called Xbox. They were doing gaming. I was a huge gamer and would love to, get in that. And at this time I'm like 20, 29, I think. And went to the interview and Lit Wong sitting there, we're sorry, but we already filled the role. And I said, well, you know what? I've never interviewed at Microsoft before. I've only been purchased. And so all I hear is terror and concern about the Microsoft interview process. So let's, could you take me through the interview if it's still set up, if that's okay, so I could learn how to do an interview? This is where I would teach my kids, don't accept a no. Always approach something not as a failure point, but as what can you learn from it? And so for me, I was like, well, my next step to do here, if I can't get an interview, is to learn how the interviews would go. So I did the interview. I get done with the interview and they go, we like you better than the guy we just hired. Could your first job be hire the guy we just hired and tell him we made a mistake? And I was like, let me get this right. So my first job is to correct a mistake that you're going to hire me for? Okay, fine. I'll make it work. And it was one of the most memorable teams. I ended up working with Tristan Jackson, who went to Bungie for a while, and worked with him at Bungie as well when he left Xbox. The high performer thing for Xbox is, it's how much impact are you having, right? And so for me, for Xbox, I started in test. That job was a test job, and you're basically an engineer plus a tester, but you have to do pretty much what you can. And Xbox was a startup, so I was able to do production work, engineering work, and test work, and had just a large impact. And it was mostly because I cared about the product. I wanted to help make sure that Xbox Live was a phenomenal gaming product. And then working on 360 and helping build the Xbox Live and continue to grow. All those people who were with us, you're in the trenches together. You've built something, you've done something that not a lot of people in their careers have been able to do, and it's phenomenal, right? And you end up creating, band of brothers. In fact, actually, I just went to lunch with a gal who used to be on my team, and it's instantly you're just yep, we're bonded. There's no awkward greeting moments. You're just right into it, right? And so it's you move on your career, and the high performance stuff is just how you're having an impact on your businesses, right? And so for Microsoft, it was back in the day you're doing stack ranking, and you're 1, 2, 3 type of stack ranking. You're always in the top 3. At least I think that's what it was. And then you're getting top rewards and that kind of stuff. That's all that means. It's the real recognition, truthfully, is getting out there. Like the original Xbox didn't compete very well, but Xbox 360, we finally competed with Sony, right? And that's really what mattered most, more than anything else. Um, but yes, I like the Microsoft model back in the day when Xbox wasn't. I'd still say it wasn't really part of Microsoft because we were really a startup. We were scrappy. We did we did everything. Um, Created multiple billions of businesses, so it was really good for us. And it was really good, I think, for the industry as well to have competition and help drive live gaming, which was the big thing that we were going for Xbox Live.
Yeah, you created Xbox Live Marketplace. Tell me about creating that.
Yeah, that was crazy times. It was interesting. Like when they Mark Whitten, who is now one of the VPs or CEOs. Sorry, Mark, if I forgot your title, but
Big executive.
he's now over and he's an executive at Unity. He came to me. Lit Wong told me, he comes into my office. This is literally how it went. Lit Wong comes to my office and says, "Jerry, we love what you've done. You have about 5 minutes. Mark's going to walk through this door and ask you to be a producer. You have to decide: do you want to go, stay on the engineering side, or do you want to go be a program manager?" Um, and I was like, 5 minutes, okay, thanks for a lot of the warning. And then Mark came in, and we went through basically what he was looking for, what he wanted, and why he thought I would be great at it. I said, great, let's go do that. And then it was like literally the next day we were planning, putting up the boards for Xbox 360. What are the features we were going after? What did we need to have? Like all this stuff. And I chose the two hardest things to go after. One was marketplace, and the other one was the security and the identification stuff. And I think I don't remember if it was Ben Kilgore or if it was somebody else. They just looked at me and they go, "No, you're not that stupid. You don't get to have two of the hardest things. You can choose one fun thing and one hard thing." And I was like, okay, fine. So I went for marketplace, and primarily I chose marketplace. Truthfully, it was because I didn't see Microsoft as a whole as putting a lot of thought into how the future of, again, folks, you're literally talking like 8 years into the internet. And there weren't a lot of companies who were pushing digital commerce and digital downloads and all of those pieces. And I really felt that from a future perspective, this is something that pretty much anything that you could distribute digitally should be distributed digitally, and it would be the wave of the future. The other big thing is I had spent a bunch of time with Korean game developers and just listened to how they thought about a lot of the challenges that game developers have of helping smaller companies go be successful. And I know everyone hates microtransactions and whatnot, but really for small developers to get over the hump of trying to get people to come in, remember, there weren't a lot of apps at that point in time. And so you're also seeing, because smartphones hadn't come out yet. So smartphones would come out around the same time, and specifically the Apple iPhone would come out about the same time that we launched Xbox 360. And so you had all this technology, like literally on the cusp of just starting, that would just change everybody's lives, and we would all take it for granted, right? But all of that required an economic system that would enable developers to do it seamlessly without them having to worry about it. And so for me, that was an incredible challenge to go after, both because you have to try to help set the business models that will be effective. And then two, you're having to tackle, truthfully, banks' way of doing work, because banks at the time, so everyone takes for granted, for example, when you go purchase something on the iPhone, you don't worry about it. It doesn't get charged. What Apple built was a stored value system that wouldn't charge until after you hit specific price points. Those price points are because then banks won't charge you more, and therefore it could be profitable for you as a business. In the early days, I think the small ticket price would prevent, like, it would have to be $5 or more And when you're trying to sell a digital avatar anything, you're like, no one's going to pay $5. Now we look at that kind of stuff, and it's like people are charging $60 in Valorant for something, or $100, and it's like, what? Back then, we didn't even imagine costs like that. I was just like, no, you need the game developers. Let's just take kart racing from Korea, for example. You just want to change the color of the car, and they want to charge 5 cents for it. How do I enable that, right? And so you had to put together partnerships across Microsoft for the teams that did have the capabilities. You had to help banks and processing places, specifically in Europe, right? Because Europe does things differently than us, and Asia was already ahead of the game. One of the key things, like, I'd have arguments. So remember, I'm a 30-year-old kid, and I know if anyone's listening to this who's not 30, that you're like, ancient person. No, it was a child. Going into like VPs of finance at Microsoft and whatnot, and debating with them to try to win Xbox Live's priority for the regions we launch into with, and arguing with them about how they're looking at the future versus how I look at the future. And then getting back to my office and having Jay Allard and Ben Kilgore pull me into an office and go, Sherry, we're going to have to think about your title and your level, because Microsoft VPs don't like young, your low-level person coming into their offices and telling them off. And I didn't think I did that, but clearly it's how it was interpreted. But those are the interesting things about large corporations that you just have to learn. I came from startups, which is why you just go after everything, right? You just don't let anything stop you. And Microsoft had rules, and I didn't like rules. So yeah.
You sound like me. Yeah. I like when people follow the rules, but to some degree. But I don't really myself.
Yeah, there's a thing that I like. Another thing I learned, because so many people learn the wrong lessons. I'm the type of person. It's like, look, it's not about Lizzie, you and I agreeing. And to me, if we're walking to our goal together and we're in complete agreement, it's kind of like we're holding hands on the same path and going to your, whatever your goal is. Alignment is much more healthy. Alignment is both of us know we want to go, let's say, to that hilltop, but we don't have to walk the same path to get there, right? And that'll allow us to potentially get there in different ways that provide different results, right? Now, sometimes you have to walk the same path because you're like, no, we need things done in a month, and then we need it delivered it this way and whatnot, in which case you do need full agreement. But most things, as long as you have alignment, you can move forward effectively, and you can at least trust each other that you're in alignment of what you're going after. And then you just have to get comfortable with the fact that your team can find better ways of doing things than you can, that you aren't as smart as you think you are. And then you rely on your team, and you become inquisitive and curious about how your team is trying to head to the same, goal that you're aligned on.
Yeah, it's pretty magical when you have your big picture goal, and then your team comes to you with something amazing that you've done.
Yeah.
They've done that you could have never, ever done. Yeah. Like that business owner joy.
Yes, exactly.
Dream. I want to talk about Bungie too, and the days of Destiny and what you learned. You were project lead for monetization. I'm sure you have tons of takeaways from that.
Yeah, I mean, I was project lead for Forsaken, Rise of Iron, I helped found the live team with Emmy Chung, who is really the creative owner of that piece. And so a lot of what truthfully, I learned a lot of this from Harold Ryan and the Bungie executive team on how do you win with publishers, how do you get the way that you're looking for, and a lot of the business side approaches of how to go after things and how to make them successful. And it was a small time. It was like almost 4 years, which is a blip of time. But I don't think I learned more in that 4 years. It was very similar to learning from Xbox, right? It was so much trying to get Destiny to be a solid game and make it successful and do what the studio needed it to do, so that you know people like Luke and Mark can go off and go do bigger things with Destiny 2. And it was a lot of fun. Like, one part of my favorite moments was, we had to do Destiny 2 had to slip. It slipped like a year and a half, I think 2 years. Um, and and you know, myself, Barry, Scott Taylor, we came up with a pretty audacious plan to help do an expansion pack at a smaller price point, and help Destiny get the revenue it needed to slip. And it was phenomenal. It was everything. Like, I had to go negotiate with Sony. I uh had to work with the team definitely a new way, right? And I wasn't perfect. I mean, I had bad points where I made a lot of mistakes, um and was told that I made a lot of mistakes, which was great. But at the end of the day, it was one of the most it's probably one of the most influential things for how I created Jar Sparks. One of the coolest things that we did was, you could pair somebody. Let's say you're an environment artist, but you've never been given the opportunity to go do level design or level art, or you're a level designer, you've never been given the opportunity to go do environment art, but you have those shared passions. When you can pair those two people together and they can mentor each other and help each other raise their excellence bars, they do amazing, amazing things at a very fast rate of speed. The other thing is that you learn to challenge yourself from a decision making perspective, where you have all this production data, and the production data tells you, well, nope, it takes let's just say, this is completely no Destiny data whatsoever. This is just me making up numbers on the spot right here. So it's just like, let's say it takes 3 months to do a level, right? And when you have to compress time and you have to, literally hand it to your team, say, look, we need this done in a month or 2 months. What would it look like? What do we need to do? And you fight past all the it's impossible, and you just say, let's just take that first step. Stop thinking it's impossible. Let's just do the first step. What does it look like? Right. And then you start realizing where really your quality is impacting, like, where are those decisions meaning, and you can balance it better because you're forcing yourself to be very, very deliberate about where investment's going, versus other areas. Because in the game industry, you literally could be on the same thing. It's never ready to ship because you're, as an artist or as a creative, you're always wanting it to be better, because you always see the flaws, right? So your job is to try to balance that and do it iteratively, so that you can build a thing, take a look at it in its most basic form, see where you think you need to improve, and the other stuff you could probably lock down, and then move it to that next stage. And can you do that faster? And then when you want to get to the quality, great. Then let's push on where quality needs to be effective. But it was a magical time, I think, at Bungie. And I really, I understand the challenges that the team's going through right now that I'm seeing from the outside. Is heartbreaking. But back in those early Destiny days, um, it was, we're creating something new. And again, that creating something new where you own the reins of what it's going to look like and how it's going to feel and what a player is going to go and see, is really fun. Like, that's why I think the industry is just a great industry to be in.
It is. Like you said before, people love what they do too.
Yeah.
And it's kind of contagious when you're with so many people that are thrilled to come to work every day and thrilled about what they're creating. It rubs off on you. I want to talk a little bit about the state of the industry right now, because you've seen a couple cycles throughout your career. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, we're in one of those cycles. I think it was, as much as we had a great, COVID run, you're just correcting for that. Like that was that literally uh a drunk moment for the
Unprecedented.
industry. Like it was not normal.
Yeah.
Um, it's really something that, now we're correcting for that. Now we're going to get back into what I would consider a more sustainable piece, right? And I also just think, a lot of industries, even even if you go back to cars and whatnot, right? Like a lot of this is also the players. The players have grown up. The players know this stuff now, right? You have kids who know about microtransactions. When I was a child, that word didn't even exist. So, um, so it's also their sophistication means that as someone who's creating games, you got to recognize that, because I actually don't think that players want to be, basically want their entertainment handed to them a penny at a time, right? There's meaningful, uh, uh, DLC. There's meaningful content that they want to be able to go after, right? One of the things we did for Halo, which I wanted to do, was change the battle pass model to just have the battle pass model be you're basically a DLC purchase. Because now it breaks some of the financials, because a bunch of the financials are based off of psychology of people fearing of missing out, right? Of FOMO. And could you break that and just have it basically be a DLC track where you're trying to track time for the player, and it's not something that they have to worry about, because they're just saying, no, I'm just buying content, I just have to earn it. And I think that's the kind of stuff where the industry has to get, as far as I'm concerned, back to something more sane, because the players, as far as me even being a player, we're kind of done with it. Like I don't want to buy things every 5 seconds. I just want to play my game and get get value out of it. Um, and I know it's specifically hard because as soon as you go free to play, you don't you don't have consistency, right, from a business perspective, to be able to be successful and say, hey, yes, I can invest 30 million and I'll get 30 million back. Like that's no longer true.
Right.
So, but the players are speaking right now, and everyone's kind of sick of it, and they just want games that are fun and they can spend their 60, $70 on and bring home and have a blast, right? um so I just think we have to challenge ourselves to say, like, what do we really want it to be like? um so
So many games that have come out this year too. I read the amount of games is at an all-time high, and just an
yeah.
interesting time in the industry. Dean had a good article on Dean Beat today about how many great games have come out and how many layoffs there are all at the same time. It is a cycle though. And it was.
Yeah, and some of that I think is because, one, you've seen a bunch of consolidation. And
Well,
again, that happens with every industry as it grows and contracts. Um, the If you look at where the great games, where they came from and whatnot, they didn't all come from these big conglomerate organizations.
yeah.
Um, some did, and some were. It's just interesting when you take a look at the NBA is making the decisions, for example, who said, nope, Apex Legends wasn't going to do good, so we're not going to deal with it. But if the team did it on their own, fantastic. And now it's a cornerstone, right?
Yeah.
Um, so there's so much that comes from what you would consider traditional market research that tells you, well, this is only worth X. And then as creators, truthfully, I take a lot of that as challenge and say, screw that. I can do a lot better than that. And I don't think I have to screw players for it either, right? And I think what you're seeing is you're seeing that quality actually matters. And it actually matters to players. And quality from the jump is what matters the most. And if you can't pull that together, and you believe you're just going to make up for your mistakes in a service-driven game, truthfully, you deserve everything that's coming to you, because I believe your players will destroy you. Um, and you have to be at a quality bar that players find acceptable. And so I also think it's just, to me, it's an opportunity, because
Yeah.
so many of the big publishers are like, no, we're not creating anything new anymore. We're just gonna stick on the franchises we have, and that's all we're going to go and do. To me, that's an opportunity to go after something, and it's the riskiest opportunity you can make, right? But you don't have to do it by going after budgets that require you to destroy your player base to make it work. Like, that's what you shouldn't be doing. And truthfully, this is something that NetEase has been really, really good about us with us on, which is thinking about the player, get the player experience first, and let's build a good business around that. Not think about, insane things and go after that and then fail, and then then you're laying off your entire team. Like, we don't want to do that.
And even look at what Amazon does. Not that Amazon's one of the most successful companies of all. Love them or hate them, but they always talk about day one, and they always talk about making sure people are happy. That's the cornerstone of Amazon, and that informs all their decisions.
Yeah, I look less to what people talk about and more about what they actually do. It's interesting seeing specifically when you're talking about Amazon. Amazon, I think, is so many different companies, and their warehouse and their delivery truck drivers. I wonder if they would agree if they are treated well. I don't know. Like,
Maybe
I
not
know my son did a paper on Amazon that was not pleasant to read through, but it was well researched, so I could look up all of his details.
Well, I think Amazon puts the customer first, not their employees. I'm not saying it's a great place to work. I mean, talk to anybody that's worked there. But I do think that they really think, what do I want, right? I want something delivered to my door in 2 hours. That is what I want. And then they really shape the way that everybody does things. So
absolutely.
I have one last question. Before I ask it, I want to point people to your website, jarofsparks.com. The last question is, what advice would you give to somebody who is looking to start a venture in games, immersive, creative tech?
As your own company, or just start a venture?
Your own company, via VC, via.
It was funny.
You say.
So Mitch Gittleman, who is another dear friend of mine, is when I talked to him about me doing my own thing, the first words out of his mouth were, "How's your health?" So I would agree that is your number one thing, because the amount of stress that you're taking on is huge. But I would tell you, it's worth it. I don't know who did this quote for me, but it's another one, which was, so often we also look to colleges to solve some of these things. And the best way to earn your MBA is creating a business. It's not going to college. It's go create a business. Go through all the hard problems and learn how to do it. College could probably help you, but you probably save a lot of money by not doing that. And the other big thing I would just tell you to do is, it's not about you. Unless you're developing anything that only takes you, and fine, then it is you. But in general, as soon as you start bringing on people, it's about your team. And be really, really clear with yourself. How do you want to run things? And be okay that your team might have different ideas and different approaches. And so you spend more of your time thinking about, what am I trying to achieve? How am I trying to do it? Like, one of the big things we always do for Jar of Sparks is we always have what's your goal? Greg Stone, my COO, is a master of this, where it's just like, Jerry, you're spouting a bunch of things. What is your goal? What are you trying to achieve? And it just causes me to slow down and think more deliberately about what you're trying to do. The more you can do things deliberately, where you're not just stating a thing, but you're really, you as the owner, you're understanding what's behind it. What are you trying to do? Why are you trying to do it? Why do you believe that's the solution? Because for me, your number one strength is any senior leader is to be curious. And in particular, you're trying to be curious to be wrong. And you have to be okay with that. Like, the biggest thing I love that I've always surrounded myself with is, it's a council of adversaries. It's a council of rivals. It's a council of people who constantly make me think harder about things, that they are not there just to say yes to me. They are there to ensure that excellence is being delivered. And that pressure to do better on a regular basis with your specifically that core group of people, and for me it's my directors, that's critical, right? And the other big thing is I I I will always go more cautious. I always assume failure is this first thing that's going to happen, and then how do you survive from that failure? How do you succeed past that failure, right? Your resilience in any type of business, your resilience is your critical trait, because no matter what you do in any business, something's going to happen that there is no way you could have foreseen, and it's how you respond to it. How do you respond to it with rigor, and how do you respond to it with passion to turn it around? That is going to matter the most. Because, for example, these market corrections and whatnot, I guarantee you a bunch of people were not planning for it. Even though they should have, I believe the indicators were pretty clear. But it's something you don't always control, right? And so you just you have to train your team. How do you think through things? How do you respond when something doesn't go right? And how are you okay with it? So often your team can live in fear because you can say the words, "Don't worry about it. It's all good." But at the end of the day, if there's layoffs or there's other things that are going on, that's why anxiety persists, right? Is because it's not all good. And instead, if you're to say, look, here's the risk we're taking. Like, stop trying to make everybody feel comfortable. They're adults. Most people who are working in your company are adults. They're not children. Now, some may be children, as in they're adults in mental, smaller bodies. But they're you have to be able to walk them through, like, this is what we're trying to do. This is how I'm trying to do it. This is why we're trying to do it. These are the risks that we're taking. Don't be afraid of that. Like, I think if your team understands that, they also can better plan. Because the other big thing is that not everybody wants to be in a startup. They may think they do. In fact, my conversation this afternoon was with somebody who was like, do you really want to be in a startup? Because most people view a startup as like, oh, we can go do anything we want to do. It's free and we can just go explore everything. It's like, no, you actually have a budget. Like, you can't hide in some corner of a corporation stack that someone else is literally paying your bills. You actually are the ones who have to pay your bills, right? And so it's a different rigor. Like I said, a lot of people have a dreamy view of what it really is versus what it actually is, right? And building trust is something that you're doing every single day, and you're going to screw up. You're going to do something that you don't think people are going to look at and go, well, that was bad. And you're going to have to go, oh, I didn't realize that. Let me go and correct, right? Let me go and make that mistake. And again, teaching your team resilience and teaching your team through your actions how you recover and how you try to make good on potentially something that wasn't good is something that you have to just always be thoughtful about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also if you hire people who are really into what they're doing, then, I mean, there are bad days and it is
Yep.
slog. It is a challenge on the way to something really good. But if you
Yeah.
love what you do, then that's okay.
Absolutely. Like, and that's the other thing is I always get a lot of college kids who are in various degrees of how do we get in the game industry? And I always ask, why? Why would you want to do this to yourself? It's hard. It is not easy. And I think anything where you have a whole group of people who are all passionate, I guarantee you they're not all passionate about the same thing.
Yeah.
And the hardest part of a game of building any game is the fact that everybody wants to build their version of that game and trying to keep everybody focused to go after one singular thing. And here are the rules and here are the philosophies on why we're going after it this way. It is a never ending battle. So
Another day in paradise.
yeah, exactly. But it is fun. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, again, like I said, I still love it. Like, I don't think I'd do anything else.
Same. That's the best.
Yeah.
We've been talking to Jerry Hook, the CEO of Jar of Sparks, which is a new NetEase studio. Jerry, where can people go to connect with you or learn more or work for your company?
Well, right now, LinkedIn is probably your best bet. Our website hopefully will be up soon. You can go to jarsparks.com. I have it all reserved and protected so that we don't get any domain people squatting on it. But the website's not there yet. Otherwise, just hit me up on LinkedIn. We have jobs posted as well at jarsparks.com on or jarsparks at LinkedIn. Yeah, we are small, right? And so we're not growing really fast. I'm not planning on growing really fast. So it will be hard to come and join this studio, but I'm also I've a bunch of people have reached out to me that I follow up with as well. Because I know how it would have been great for me if I were starting out. When I started, there wasn't a game industry really. And so I know how difficult it is. And I would love to just help some people if I can. Obviously, my time's limited, so I can't do a lot. But I definitely have the heart to do it for sure, especially if you're here in Washington State.
I'm going to add to that. If you do reach out to someone and ask for help, it's good to be really specific about what
Yes.
exactly they could help you with and how, and maybe even suggest some time, because on the other side, it can be quite busy, as like Jerry said.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. The other thing is I always tell people is don't get offended. If you're not being responded back to too often. I think one of the biggest things we trained our society to do is instant gratification with your phones. One of the first things I teach my kids with the phones is text is asynchronous for a reason. The only time you need to respond to it is when you can. It's about your priorities. It's not about the person texting you's priorities. So the same thing if you're messaging anybody on LinkedIn or whatnot is be patient. It's not a judgment on you at all. It's just a recognition of their time and their space that they're in.
Yes. Thanks, Jerry.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the show this week. To catch all the latest from Here's Waldo, you can follow us on LinkedIn. Be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes. We'll see you next time.